Platform project. Okay. 3 o'clock. You'll sit in the car.
Yeah. How's your family?
Hope you all had a good lunch.
She's
and
great.
All good, yeah.
absorbed all sorts of useful information this morning. I'm Richard Gueterbock. I'm one of the co-editors of the Farm of the Future report, and what we're going to try and do here today is to give a bit of a view of some of the things that farmers can think about doing to bring a more circular approach to the way you manage residue slurries and provide nutrients to the soil. So this is one of the many elements of the Farm of the Future report. I would encourage any of you who haven't yet tried to download bits of it from the RASE site to do so. Hopefully there's something for everybody in it. But this is very much the next stage, which is, having produced the report last year, is to try and drill down into actions and activities that farmers can think about for their own activities, their own farm, and every farm is going to be different, so every application is going to be different. But what we did in the report is try to identify some of the technologies, some of the innovations, some of the systems that are already here and available for use that can help farming with the transition to net zero, and also to meet some of the milestones that have been set for 2030 and beyond. We had a bit of a discussion in the morning about the way in which we can change the way we manage land, agroecology, use of tree planting, and we've covered. We're going to talk a bit today about crop nutrition and the way in which that can be tied in with anaerobic digestion and bioenergy. And then the next stage to that is, how do you use that energy on farms? Can farms become suppliers of energy to their local community? And what are the vehicles and the uses that can be applied for bioenergy that's being produced on farms?
I need to give you this when I finish speaking.
We'll have a talk on AD from Lucy Hopwood from NNFCC. We'll just talk about some of the farming systems that are available. And the important thing is, if you're looking at AD, I like to use the phrase, don't have the tail wagging the dog. You need to have a system that is tailored to the site, and a system that is actually suitable for that particular farm application, whether it's a slurry system covering a slurry store, or a modular system which can be, the biogas can be produced from a sort of tank-based system and used on site. We're also going to pick up on organics recycling, some of the issues and some of the ways in which we can use natural nutrients to replace fossil fertilizer, but also some of the ways in which we need to manage that system, get the regulatory framework in place. You know, it'd be nice if it was simpler, but we have rules and regulations that have to be dealt with, and we'll have a talk from Becvar which will cover some of those issues. And then we'll move on to powertrains and fuels. We have some really exciting technology which we're going to show later on. So we've got the New Holland gas tractor outside. We'll open those doors at the end of this session, so we move into networking. You'll be able to see the tractor. We've also got some JCB electronic load hauls. But really exciting is what JCB are doing to develop a hydrogen engine. So, you know, gas fuels are going to be a big part of the transition of farming away from diesel, but also electric vehicles, small tractors, swarm robots are all going to contribute to the reduction of emissions from agriculture. You know, as we say, the industry is still a major user of fossil fuels, and a lot of those go into tractors and trucks. And one of the things we tried to do when we were developing the Farm of the Future report was to try and use graphics to help illustrate the potential that's out there. And there are a number of graphics that can be downloaded from the website that just shows some of the vision that is there in terms of soil management, no-till, robotics, agroecology, just in simple ways. And part of the challenge, as John Gummer illustrated in his talk this morning, is to convince the politicians and the civil servants that are supposed to be working with agriculture in terms of transition, convince them that things need to be done, the technologies are there, but the farmers need help with the investment required and need a framework which they can work to, and that is not always evident. But I think the reason we produced the report for RASE was really to just flag up, not only to the farming community, but also to regulators, to policymakers, that there are opportunities for agriculture to make a major contribution to decarbonisation of the food chain, but we need help doing it. All right, I'll stick with that. So without further ado, our first speaker is going to be Lucy. And Lucy has worked in the AD industry for as long as I have, and will give a quick sort of tour of the role of AD on farms. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Richard, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. Just while my slides are being loaded up, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Lucy Hopwood. I'm a Business Development Director and Lead Consultant for Bioenergy and Anaerobic Digestion at NNFCC. So we're strategic business consultants operating across the full bioeconomy. I'm based in York, the company's based in York, but we're an international consultancy. So a lot of my business is in the UK and Europe, business for, in other sectors of our company is beyond the UK. So I'm just going to talk to you about the importance of AD in the UK and with a specific focus on the farming community, given the audience we've got today, really looking at where the opportunities are for the farming community, both now and what we're expecting in the future. So I should say I come from a farming background, from a family farm in Yorkshire. I studied at HARPER, studied crop management quite a few years ago now, so it's good to be back today, and I've been in the AD industry for 20 years, so hopefully can share some of the wisdom that I've picked up along the way with you today. So just to start out kind of going over the AD process, I think it's really fundamental that we start with the feedstock. Without feedstock, AD just wouldn't happen. What we need is a real kind of stable, secure and fairly consistent feedstock supply for AD to be successful. And I think that's something that the farming community has and can provide to the industry that a lot of others can't provide. So that feedstock can comprise a range of different materials, any organic materials. So it can be products and co-products. So crop feedstock, maize, for example, straw, a co-product of crop production. We could have agricultural residues. So we could have, say, outgrade potatoes, outgrade vegetables, spoilt veg, tops and tails of beet, for example, lots of different ag residues that could be used, processing residues. So once they've left the farm and gone off to the processor, we could have any number of kind of residues, so distillery wastes and residues, brewery residues, that kind of thing. And waste feedstock. So that waste could be kind of post-consumer waste. It could be food waste coming from the household or kind of commercial sector, or of relevance to you, it could be livestock waste. So slurries and manures is something that's definitely valuable to the AD process. The feedstocks that I've kind of circled here are the feedstocks that the current policies and regulations really focus on. So it's not about producing making products to feed AD plants. It's about using waste and residues that are arising as a result of other activities. It's about using those through AD and actually extracting value and making them work for the industry. So a mix of feedstocks or a single feedstock suitable for AD would be fed into a sealed container, an anaerobic unit, and digested, and from that you get two outputs. So the first output that I'll talk about is the biogas. We get very hung up on the AD industry being about energy generation, being about decarbonisation, producing low carbon energy and kind of improving our energy security. But actually energy is just a part of the kind of output and the mix, the value of anaerobic digestion. But in terms of that energy, the biogas output, you can combust that through an on-site combined heat and power engine to generate heat and power, either for on-site use or for export to other local consumers or to via the electricity network, for example. You could put the biogas through a boiler if it's a particularly small-scale system and just generate heat that you could use back in the farming business. So in the dairy, for example, to warm the wash water or for the some kind of process heat in the system. Or you can go a step further. You can actually clean up that biogas by stripping out the carbon dioxide and other contaminant gases and producing a pure biomethane stream. And that biomethane can be used for multiple things. Ultimately, you can inject it into the gas grid. So that's happening at scale quite widely across the UK for decarbonising the heat sector via the gas network. Or you can use it as a transport fuel in domestic, commercial or agricultural vehicles, which I'll talk a bit more about, and then will talk a bit more about in his presentation as well. So I mentioned it's always kind of, the industry's always been kind of based around the energy outputs, but we get the second output, the secondary output from this, which has always been deemed a byproduct of the process. And I think we need to view it, we need to change the mindset of the industry, kind of developers, investors, operators, and look at this very much as a co-product. So alongside the energy output, we're also producing a digestate, which is a nutrient-rich organic fertiliser that can be used should be used back on the land or back in the area where the material, the feedstock, was generated. So very much creating that kind of circular system. And you'll hear more about digestate from Anna shortly. In terms of the UK AD market, so we've got a good spread of AD facilities across the UK. It's a well-established market now. We have 663 operational AD facilities on the ground in the UK, and they range in scale from a few kilowatts of electrical or heat output up to thousands of or tens of thousands of kilowatts or megawatts of output in terms of the gas injection facilities. So I just illustrating on this graphic the kind of split between CHP facilities, so those plants that are actually burning the biogas on site and using that biogas on site or using the energy on site or locally, and those that are upgrading that biogas to produce biomethane and injecting that into the grid. So in terms of plant numbers, only about 120 out of the 663 are upgrading the biogas and injecting that into the grid. So CHP still dominates. However, look at production capacity, so the installed capacity of these facilities. Generally, the biomethane injection projects, because they're more costly, the upgrading units, the injection kind of infrastructure is more costly. You need to kind of achieve those economies of scale to get the gas into the grid. So generally, they're bigger projects and contribute a greater proportion of the installed capacity than they do in terms of plant numbers. Add on to that the actual production efficiency, the conversion efficiency of those of that gas, those feedstocks through to the gas and the energy, and you'll see that biomethane injection starts to dominate. So it's surpassed CHP capacity in terms of the energy contribution it's making because it's achieving greater efficiencies. Looking at it by feedstock type, just to put some of those numbers in context from a farm perspective. So the chart on the left is the number of plants. So you'll see, based on the number of plants, about 70% of plants in the UK are farm-fed. So they're fed using feedstocks arising on farm. And only 30% of them are waste-fed. But if you look at the right-hand side chart, as you're looking at it, only around 40% of installed capacity comes from the farm-based plants because generally they're smaller scale. A term I like to use is scale appropriate. They are scale appropriate for the place that they're located, the feedstock that's available, and the offtake that is being generated. So yeah, about 60% of the installed capacity still comes from the waste-fed facilities. Now this graphic's quite interesting. So currently the AD treatment capacity in the UK amounts to about 17 million tonnes of throughput per annum, so quite a sizable industry. And these graphics, each of the bars on this graphic, so we've got 4 feedstock categories from processing residues, food waste, ag residues and livestock waste. Each of the bars represents the total availability of each feedstock type in the UK. And then the shaded part of the bar represents what's currently being used in AD in the UK. So you can see in terms of processing residues, about 70% of processing residues generated in the UK are currently treated through AD. About 60% of food waste arising is treated through AD. 50% of agricultural residues, but only 3% of livestock waste is treated through AD. Of livestock waste that we're generating in the UK is treated through AD. So we're generating about 90 to 100 million tonnes of livestock waste, slurry and manure per annum in the UK, currently treating 3 million tonnes of that. So if you look at where the greatest potential is for growth in the industry, it sits in that bottom bar. So livestock waste is where we're really focusing in terms of future growth. In terms of policies and regulations, not going through this in any detail because there's a lot to talk about here. I could talk for days on this. Just really kind of showing there have been a lot of incentives that have encouraged the development and growth in the AD industry over the past couple of decades. They continue to do so, but most of the incentive mechanisms have come to an end. They've closed now. So we're really looking at the Green Gas Support Scheme, which is supporting kind of large-scale biomethane injection facilities, or the Renewable Transport Fuels Obligation, which supports use of biomethane as a transport fuel in agricultural vehicles as well as kind of road vehicles, commercial and domestic vehicles. So the Green Gas Support Scheme is unlikely to support many new farm-based projects just because of the kind of size, the sweet spot, the cost of the technology and the kind of duration and inflexibility of that scheme, whilst the Renewable Transport Fuels Obligation does remain a real opportunity for the UK farming industry. So that obligation supports the suppliers of the fuel. So if you're a biomethane producer, but also a user, you're supplying the fuel to yourself as part of a closed kind of system, you would benefit from the value of that incentive mechanism. And I think that's, again, where we need to be focusing the efforts going forward. So in terms of the technologies available, we've got three technology providers here today that you can talk to after we finish these presentations. This is just really to showcase the photos along the top of this slide are true kind of scale appropriate, farm scale, farm kind of focused AD facilities or methane capture facilities. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you've got a kind of very small scale conventional AD facility that you feed on a regular basis. You generate the gas and you burn that gas through a boiler or a CHP facility. That's intended to kind of suit an average or small dairy farm in the UK. Next along the top, we've got the solution that Bennaman is offering. So that's a covered a lagoon cover, which captures fugitive methane emissions. So it's not conventional AD. You're not building an AD plant. You're capturing methane emissions that would otherwise be vented to the atmosphere and converting them into energy through either burning them, or you can upgrade them with some technology that Bennaman are offering. You can upgrade them, the gas, and actually produce biomethane to fuel a vehicle or vehicles nearby or on the farm. Then we have the Biofactory, kind of modular containerized system, and Cube Renewables, similar kind of containerized modular system, which suit different scales of livestock farms in the UK. But they're all intended to focus, they all really focus on kind of slurry-based systems. And just for comparison and context, along the bottom we have a large-scale farm facility that's using a lot of crop feedstock, just for kind of comparison of scale, and a kind of medium-scale waste facility, which again is operating a nice closed-loop system by producing fuel to fuel waste collection vehicles. Just to show that the potential of fueling tractors, farm vehicles is real. We've got the New Holland tractor out here. This is actually a picture of me doing a charity tractor run in the methane fuel tractor in December. Yeah, I think these vehicles are available, and it really is an opportunity to really close the loop and actually be kind of energy efficient, self-sufficient on farm yourselves. So to sum up in terms of opportunities and challenges, the AD market in the UK is strong, but there's potential for growth. I think the biggest constraints at the moment are accessing good quality feedstock and having a stable, secure feedstock supply. And again, I'll say again, that's where you as the farming community can really kind of offer value and help. In terms of the challenges, it's always been about energy, it's always been about subsidies, incentives, getting that support from the government. I think we just need to change the mindset and actually look at the other benefits that AD can bring. So AD is a good tool for managing nutrients on farm, capturing fugitive emissions from manure and slurry storage and management, improves soil quality, improves water and air quality on farm. So a lot of wider benefits that AD can help with without it all being about energy. So yeah, I think as feedstock producers, there's a lot of potential there. Thank you.
Lucy, thank you very much. So, following on the overview of the AG sector from Lucy, Anna Becvar is now going to talk about one of the issues that Lucy has highlighted, which is the available nutrients and the challenges and opportunities in getting those nutrients onto the land.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I studied soils and plant nutrition at Y College. I think we're very Harpered today, so I thought I would fly the flag. I got inundated earlier. There were 5 XY people here. 6. There you go. So Earthcare Technical Limited, we're a consultancy firm that looks at air, soils and water. And in improving soils effectively, we've been using biowaste for a number of years. I think I first started working on recycling industrial materials like cheese factory waste probably 25 to 30 years ago. Those waste streams are now being treated within anaerobic digestion plants. Possibly some of the more solid ones are going into composting and so forth. So we're ending up with better products that can improve soils, which is a good thing. But we must start off before we start using these products by testing and observing our soils. Getting a good baseline so that when we actually test the biowaste we're going to use, we can balance it effectively. Because we are applying mixtures of waste, what we don't want to do is go for the nitrogen but overload the phosphate. So it is very much about getting the correct balance and looking at the benefits as well as the potential disbenefits in the application rate we might use to use that product. Some materials also have a liming value. A liquid digestate is very unlikely to have an effect on pH because it's very low dry matter. So although it might be a high pH material, it's not going to move that soil pH very much. It's also about whether our cultivation system is appropriate for using a biowaste. Where is that biowaste going to sit in our soil profile if we're in a no-till or very low-till situation? We don't want to build nutrients up at the surface that aren't immediately accessible to the plant to grow and that might actually be washed off with soil erosion in these rather heavy rainfall events we've been getting every day in March. So it is about appropriate use. Optimising livestock access to soils also protects them, but in doing so, we've got to collect those manures and slurries and store them effectively. We're spending a lot of time at the moment going through planning on new slurry stores. And again, it's about nutrient balance. We're finding it very difficult in some areas to get these stores through because once you've even covered and captured all the gases from those livestock slurries, potentially you've got ammonia emissions from vents and so forth, which could have an effect on sensitive habitats. So how do we weigh up ammonia emissions versus better application of slurries because we've stored them and we're going to be spreading them at a better time to limit runoff and soil erosion, but also optimise nitrogen use. So we have a difficult balancing act as farmers to actually perform this. Incorporating crop residues is a really good way of improving soils, which doesn't seem to be mentioned that often. I come from a Hampshire chalkland farm. We're very remote from livestock. We get a small amount of livestock manure from the neighbouring livestock farm, but really incorporating crop residues is how we've built our soil organic matters back up, by constantly chopping and incorporating straw. And also judicious use of cover crops. So when we're using biowaste, the thing that we have to actually take into account is, are they a waste, a product, or a non-waste? Because the regulatory pathway that you spread this material on a farm is going to be hampered by where it's come from and how you're going to use it. So in terms of a straight out waste product, so that will be something like cheese factory waste coming out of a cheese factory. If you were going to spread that to land, it falls under environmental permitting regulations. And therefore, you have to ask permission from the Environment Agency by preparing an agricultural benefit statement, spread risk maps, a series of paperwork, pop that into the Environment Agency, and then they will issue a deployment, which is your permission to spread. It's very important as a farmer not to get caught out. If a material is a waste, it must go down this regulatory pathway. I'm often referred to as a fun sponge by one of my farming clients, and that's probably what I'm sounding like right now. So there are also quality protocols and end of waste routes for some bio-waste materials. And digestate, PAS 110 digestate under the biofertilizer certification scheme is a quality protocol, if you like, tick box product material. You can take quite unique materials via an end of waste. And again, you can either do that declaring it self-declaration, or you take it through the Environment Agency pathway. Then we've got manures, and manures are actually a waste when they go into an AD plant, but they're exempt when we land spread them. Few. So under that route, it's very straightforward, and if you have a digestate that is made out of livestock manure and energy crop, that is effectively a farm waste subject to all the regulations and guidance, MVZs, etc., but you don't have to ask permission to spread it from the Environment Agency. And then we've got energy crops. Now, if energy crops are used specifically in an AD plant, they are non-waste. And that means that you've seen quite a few materials being sold on the horticultural amenity market in your local garden centre, which may have come from an energy crop digestate, because it's straightforward, non-waste. And then finally, anything that is derived from sewage sludge falls under the sludge use in agriculture regulations. That's on the change. There's going to be a new resource framework coming out, but effectively they will always be regulated separately, because there are different controls on everything that goes into a sewage plant than there are in any of these other scenarios. So we've got tighter regulation. We also have the Biosolids Assurance Scheme, which is a voluntary scheme signed up to by all of the big water companies, which gives you further assurance when using sewage sludge. So what are the practical considerations once we've got past the regulatory considerations? It's how we're actually going to use this material. First thing is the feedstock. What's it made out of? And every different material is going to have an individual analysis. No two AD plants are the same, because they've got different feedstock mixes, different dry matters, liquid added. So always get an up-to-date soil liquid analysis of the digestate, so you know exactly what's in it, so you can do your calculations properly on what is going to become crop available when it's applied to land. Look at the treatment process. The good thing about these materials going through an AD plant are they are being sanitized. The biological process breaks the materials down, produces our digestate and biogas, but it also sanitizes the material that we're going to use. And if there's pasteurization added on the back end as well, that is going to lower the risk of potential pathogen transfer out onto crops and things. So any food waste plant will have a pasteuriser on the back end, or the front end, in fact. On-site storage is also really important. A lot of the early AD plants have been built with very little storage on site. That's fine if we've got storage at the destination farm. In fact, that's an ideal scenario, because if we can store it where it's going to be used, we can use it quickly without waiting for the transport to catch us up in the field. But on-site storage is critical, because if we don't have enough, that can be a driver to farms taking it when they shouldn't. And we don't want to do that, because we want to protect our soils and make sure that we get the maximum value out of the material. If we apply it as close as possible to crop need, the crop can take it up, use the nutrients, and we have less losses to the wider environment. So in terms of products, we are making headway in taking some of the water out of some of these materials, reducing the level of transport that's required, and improving what we can use. Fibre digestate is a fantastic source of carbon, and it's a great way to build soils and improve soils. Liquid digestate is principally a liquid fertiliser. So each one has a different NPK value and trace elements as well. There are systems out there now for pelletising the fibre and also producing things like prills. We now have ammonia recovery systems, which is exciting because we can strip out some of that ammonia and actually produce an ammonium sulfate fertiliser or an ammonium nitrate fertiliser. But that material usually ends up being quite strong, and so we'd probably use that in fertiliser production in the UK to replace some of the fossil fuel derived fraction. So in terms of distribution, transport is key. We want to minimise transport distances, and that might mean taking out that water volume. Storage, and actually getting storage through planning is a bit of a challenge. And it's an unfortunate challenge, because if we can store the digestate on the farms where we're going to use it, it means, like in a difficult spring that we've had this year, we've got it there ready to go. We'll have stored it over a winter period, and then we can get spreading when that crop starts moving. We basically had a fantastic February this year, and we're spreading great amounts every day, lovely dry periods, crops were romping away, and then March happened, and we didn't spread anything for the whole of March. So storage is key, because we don't want to spread it when we've got rainfall imminent and it's just going to get washed off. Land bank should be directly associated with that storage. So we try and plan a nice sized lagoon, 15,000 cubic metres, that is going to serve a very big land bank nearby, and that lagoon can be filled a couple of times, 3 times, for the spring and autumn applications. And that works really well. Or, given your road network, you might find it easier to have these 2,000 cubic metre cage stores that you can space around the countryside, and that will be doing a smaller area of land. But it is all about logistics in getting these materials on at the right time. And then application, it's about having the right kit to do the job. And there's been a lot of innovation in kit, and we're looking at some very nice pieces. So there's the Xeron up the top there. That can now spread to 36 metres on tram lines. Switches off across the boom, so we can do 24 metres as well. And what we'd like to do is get out of spreading a bucket of liquid material which only contains 4 or 5 kilos of nitrogen. Because obviously, by comparison, 1 cubic metre or tonne of digestate compared to a bag of fertiliser, it means a lot of transport and logistics. We've also looking at prills and actually pelletising material over on the far left. What we don't want to do is put a lot of energy into that process. We don't want to use lots of energy and heat unless we've got an excess on site. Otherwise, again, our carbon footprint is going to be upset. In this central picture, we're growing algae, and we're actually stripping out phosphate by feeding the algae on it, and then we can use that algae as a fertiliser. There's a lot of new stuff going on, which is very exciting. And then finally over here, I've got a bag of Blooming Amazing, which is a bag of fibre crop-based digestate that is being sold in various garden centres as a soil improver. Other brands are also available, just in case my other client is in the room. So exciting times. We can look and explore biowaste options. It's going to be limited to what is available near your farm that you can use, but always get it tested, get your analysis, and you can run it through something like Manna NPK to look at what's actually crop available from that analysis. So testing nitrogen, test total nitrogen, ammonium nitrogen, and nitrate nitrogen. So you've got the right figures to do your calculations. Richard's haunting me. I'm going to have to speed up. So plan your long-term objectives for your farm. You could use one type of biowaste one year and then another year, and make sure that your nutrient balance across the crop rotation is kept in sync. Consider on-farm storage, invest in application equipment to do the job really well, and think about that horrible word, valorisation, add value with the equipment that you're using. Can we move those nutrients around to where they're needed? Certain catchments have been in the news rather a lot lately. Can we pick up the nutrients from the Y and the Usk and move them to a different area for better use? And finally, going back to the fun sponge, follow regulations and guidance. It's quite a complex area. Just make sure that you can get it right.
Thank you very much, Anna. A brilliant oversight on the use of natural nutrients. Now, our third speaker is my friend Llewellyn, who's one of the most knowledgeable people in the UK on the use of biomethane as a vehicle fuel, and he's going to talk about fuels and related issues.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, so I'm going to talk about alternative fuels. I'm going to give you an overview of how I see alternative fuels, and I'm also going to then zoom in on biomethane and gas fuels for transport, because this is really my area of expertise. A bit about me is I've been in the AD sector since 2009. I've built several on-farm anaerobic digestion plants, and in 2013 I installed a biogas upgrader on a small agricultural AD plant, and we used that biomethane to run 3 small vans which were built as natural gas vehicles, and since then that really gave me the bug for getting excited about moving from organic waste and residues all the way through to high performance fuels with guaranteed performances, with off-the-shelf gas variants from the major manufacturers across a range of different vehicle types. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is to show you how it's done and how people are doing this, and hopefully empower you to go and explore these options for yourselves and really see how they can fit within your agricultural operations or within your applications. Because a common theme that we've been hearing today from Lucy and from Anna is it's all about scale appropriateness. Okay, so some alternative fuels on particular scales will be appropriate to some applications, others less so. Okay, so in terms of a bit of a background, the way that I interpret an alternative fuel is a fuel, particularly for transport, which does not rely on oil or fossil carbon. Okay, so broadly we can separate those into 3 camps. We've got liquid fuels, we've got gas fuels, and then we've got electricity. So liquid fuels, I should think, quite familiar with biodiesel, with HVO, which is hydrotreated vegetable oil, and with bioethanol. So a little bit of a background. Biodiesel is predominantly made from used cooking oil methyl ester or rapeseed methyl ester, which is processed oils. HVO is made from processed oils but using a different processing technique, and also some wastes. And then bioethanol is from the fermentation and distillation of cellulosic materials. So Brazil is one of the world's biggest bioethanol exporter because sugarcane, which grows abundantly there, is refined to produce bioethanol. We're going to look at gaseous fuels because we've got a gas tractor sitting outside, which obviously runs on biomethane. But we're going to look at the gaseous fuels in the context of where they've come from and where they are now and what's next. So I think we can talk about biomethane as being a drop-in alternative to natural gas, but it has the carbon reduction credentials associated with being either a carbon negative or a very low carbon impact fuel. But we wouldn't be able to be using biomethane with the confidence that we do had it not been for natural gas. All the innovation in the supply chain of the equipment to compress the natural gas and then the vehicles to use the natural gas. Had it not been for that bridge that natural gas had built, we wouldn't be at the adoption ready state we are for biomethane. And likewise, when we look to the future, hydrogen is clearly the next step. And so the use and the understanding of how to manage compressed gases from biomethane and CNG will apply to how we use and how we manage hydrogen, okay? Because there's a wholesale shift change to go from liquid fuels to gas fuels. And then electric vehicles are equally relevant when we talk about alternative fuels because you may not have access to biomethane or compressed natural gas or HVO, but you might have a very good solar resource. And where you can't perhaps use all of your solar generation for export into the grid, you might be able to store some of that electricity on site in batteries and then use it to fuel vehicles like the JCB electric vehicles that are out there. Something which I'm not going to go into too much detail on, but when you're looking at alternative fuels, you need to think about the well-to-wheel emissions cycle, not just the tailpipe-to-wheel emissions cycle. What I mean by this is if you have, for example, an electric vehicle which produces no exhaust, but the electricity from that vehicle has been obtained by running a dirty fossil fuel powered generator, you have to ask yourself what's the actual real carbon saving of the electricity that's been used to run that vehicle. So it's just to point you in the direction, it's all about well-to-wheel emission cycle. So that's the embedded carbon in the production of the fuel and the use of the fuel that we need to consider. I'm going to show you some photos in a minute of the range of gas vehicles which are available. Okay, both biomethane and hydrogen, because it's important that you see that this is practical and it's happening now. And then I'm also going to just talk about the fact that terminology is important. By and large, we talk about compressed natural gas, compressed biomethane, compressed hydrogen, but you can get biomethane and natural gas in a liquefied form, okay? CNG or LNG. And the two, while the engines are the same, the storage and the management of the fuels is very different. LNG is a cryogenic gas at 164 degrees, and if you turned up with a compressed natural gas, compressed biomethane fueled New Holland tractor to an LNG refueling station, you wouldn't be able to fill it up. Okay, and so without further ado, we're going to start looking at some vehicles. So JCB have invested very heavily in developing a hydrogen range for their vehicles, and what's important to understand is that these vehicles run on compressed hydrogen. Typically, I think it's 500 bar. They rely on an internal combustion engine to take the energy in the hydrogen and turn that into useful work, not a fuel cell, okay? Because there's a lot of talk about hydrogen fuel cells, and one of the reasons why this may be the case is because fuel cells are very strongly exothermic. So while they convert hydrogen to electricity, they also produce a lot of waste heat. So hydrogen in JCB's application is with an internal combustion engine, so it does have an exhaust pipe, but the combustion of hydrogen with oxygen produces water vapour. Just important to appreciate that. And then below we have the New Holland gas tractor, and this is a tractor that's available. You could sign up and buy one now. I'm sure they'd be delighted to sell you at least 10. And this photograph that I took was when we'd been supporting a gas tractor trial on a farm in Cheshire, and it's doing real tractor work, and it's running on a different fuel. The market for gas variance is not just limited to agricultural vehicles and construction plant. Okay, this is really fundamentally important. Wherever there is an operation which has a logistics element and is involved in food production or processing, and or is involved with plant, there will be other vehicles which will be required by that business. So these are some photos which I've been involved with in the course of my work. And I just wanted to explain that what we have here in the top left is that's a 460 horsepower truck. Okay, so that can pull it's a 44-ton gross weight trailer unit. Okay, and that's pulling in this photograph, a trailer load of compressed biomethane, so 6,500 tons of gas compressed to 250 bar. And that's actually operating out of an anaerobic digestion plant where it's used to collect feedstock, take out digestate, and move the gas to the sites where it's used. So you can see that there's a closed loop cycle here. So the waste is used to make the gas to get more waste than to take out the digestate. It's useful. So second photo is a Scania gas truck. Scania offer a full range of gas trucks up to 410 horsepower. Okay, this one's got a skip loader on the back built by Hiab. The next one is an Iveco. That is a Euro Cargo, I think. It's a smaller tipper truck, but that's operating in central London, as is this garbage truck here that we can see, which is a Mercedes Iconic. Very importantly, gas engines are much quieter than diesel engines, so you can run in residential neighbourhoods earlier or later because the vehicles are quieter. And then you've got the New Holland gas tractor. Gas fuels, whether it's compressed natural gas, compressed biomethane, or hydrogen, have to be compressed, stored and dispensed in order to access them. So I just want to show you some photographs of what some of the infrastructure looks like in order to actually do this. So on the first photo, we have a compressor which is drawing gas out of the gas grid, and then it's compressing it into storage. So it's stored at 250 or 300 bar, and then it's dispensed into the vehicles using a dispenser. And I've actually got a nozzle and a filling connection if anyone wants to see what it actually looks and feels like to hold one of these. And it's very similar in approach to filling up with liquid fuels. You have a dispenser which tells you how much gas you're putting in. So it's very easy to adjust to using this fuel. So if we think about the upstream now, is anyone here running a biogas plant? Okay, okay, so we're going to look at two applications for production of vehicle fuel. First of all, if you're running a CHP plant, which, looking at Lucy's slides, the majority of by number of the plants in the UK are actually generating electricity by burning the gas. If you want to make some vehicle fuel, you'll need to upgrade it. And you can do that by putting an upgrader on in parallel to the CHP, and either you can increase the biogas production of your biogas plant by feeding it more, or perhaps you could cover your digestate storage lagoon or tank in order to capture any residual biogas that's in your digestate. Or you might have such a market opportunity, such a demand for fuel that you actually think, well, I can make more money out of renewable transport fuel certificates and diesel displacement and the carbon credentials associated with what I'm doing, if you're a supplier to, say, a supermarket, that you think, well, actually, we'll put the upgrader on and then we'll run the CHP at a slightly lower output to free up that biogas to run that upgrader. That's going to give you vehicle fuel, which you would be able to recover the renewable transport fuel certificates and displace the diesel. This is a smaller upgrader built by Metana. I'm going to move on to the next application because I'm short on time. If you're running a gas to grid plant and you've got the opportunity to use to make vehicle fuel because you want to displace the amount of diesel that you're using, you can intercept that biomethane after the upgrader and you can compress it and use it as vehicle fuel. And then in that case, you get to keep 100% of the value of the renewable transport fuel certificates, okay? And then also you don't then have to buy the diesel that you would otherwise be buying. And in practice, this is what Emerald Biogas are doing in Newton Aycliffe in County Durham, where in the background of this photo here, you can see a large upgrader. And then there's a pipe that runs from the upgrader across to the grid entry unit, which is out of shot to the left. And then there's a compressor in this green box, which sucks biomethane out of the main pipe that goes between the upgrader and the grid entry unit, compresses it to 250 bar for storage, and then it's dispensed into vehicles. So you can see that actually if you've got an on-site transport load, whether it's for tractors or whether it's for trucks, the vehicles are there, the technology is there, the financial incentives are there. So it's not a question of wouldn't it be nice, it's like, right, when are we going to do this? So that's really the taster that I've got on this topic for you all. But if anyone wants to talk about it afterwards, I'll be here. So thank you very much.
Will, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, we've rattled through presentations because the key part of today is to give you a chance to talk to practitioners, people who are developing products and anaerobic digestion systems. And outside that door, which I'll open in a moment, we've got both New Holland and JCB who very kindly have brought down equipment to demonstrate to us. So we've got a New Holland biogas tractor and we've got some electric telehandlers from JCB. And the guys from JCB will also talk about their plans with hydrogen, which is really very exciting. And this is crucially important. You know, we have a government that's telling us it's going to get rid of internal combustion engines in the very near future. This is a complete nonsense. Even the Germans are now recognising this. We've got to develop low emission and zero emission internal combustion engines for use in mining, construction, farming and other low margin sectors. We've also got a number of biogas companies who again very generously have agreed to come along today. We've got Biofactory, who are a modular system. They've got a plant on a farm near Crewkerne. We've got Benneman, who are developing methane capture covering lagoons and are working very closely with New Holland. And we've also got Cube Renewables, who've been putting biogas plants on farms for a number of years. As well as that, we've got LN Tech and N2 Applied, who've come here to sort of show some of their nutrient management technology that are being developed. And my fellow editor of the report, Angie Bywater, is here with a lot of exciting materials to sniff and poke about with as digestate and other things. And she and Emma and Marie Kirby will be by the stand over by the banner outside, happy to talk and answer questions you may have about those sort of products. So we've got about half an hour. Use that time to talk to some of the people who are here, network, and then we're going to go back to where we had our lunch for the final session. So thank you very much for all our three speakers.